Ladies and gentlemen, without further delay, Dr. Brandi Vann is our distinguished guest speaker. She's currently serving as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for ChemBio Defense. And in this capacity, she's the Principal Advisor to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs. And she conducts defense-level research, development, and acquisition activities from concept and requirements development through early science and technology to advanced development, testing and evaluation, and procurement. These efforts focus on reducing the risk from emerging threats and fielding sustainable capabilities to all our services in accordance with the Department, the services, and the Combatant Command priorities for ChemBio and radiological defense, and ensuring our warfighters can fight and win in a CBRN contested environments. She's not a stranger to this mission set or to this community at all. Most of us know her previously. Dr. Vann worked for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, where she served as a Chief of Advanced and Emerging Threats. At DTRA, she led the assessment of future chemical and biological combat threats to aid in the prioritization of capability investments to provide protection, situational awareness, and recovery to future force, as well as inform the creation of ChemBio doctrine and concept of operations. And during her tenure there, she also led the development of medical countermeasures, environmental detection, and medical diagnostic systems. She's received numerous awards and commendations for her work, including the Office of the Director of National Intelligence Meritorious Achievement Award for her management of an innovative program to detect contaminated battlefields. Prior to coming to the Department of Defense, she worked as the Director of Laboratories for Nephron Pharmaceutical Corporation. And while there, she was responsible for the startup of a new state-of-the-art facility for the manufacturing of generic respiratory therapies and sterile pre-filled medications for hospitals and medical facilities. And in this role, she was responsible for the building of the laboratory infrastructure and the regulatory clearance to commence a full operational capability. And quite frankly, that couldn't be more applicable and timely given all of the work we have with COVID and trying to expedite our vaccine developments. Dr. Vann was a visiting scientist at the Counterterrorism and Forensic Science Research Unit at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And while at the FBI, she provided research experience in forensic technology and trace analysis in support of the FBI Laboratory Division mission to include development of novel methodologies of chemical and biological agent analysis in environmental and clinical samples. She's also worked in South Carolina Department of Agriculture, Livestock Poultry Health Unit as a veterinary forensic toxicologist. She's received her Ph.D. in chemistry from the University of South Carolina, where she studied analytical chemistry and applied statistics. And she's also held as a senior executive fellowship from the Kennedy School at Harvard University. I can tell you personally, having worked with her, she has come into this role as the DASD with full energy, vigor, and enthusiasm, and has absolutely catalyzed a recognition of emerging threats. So Dr. Vann, we're excited you're here to talk with us today, and we're excited to listen to your presentation in the Q&A session afterwards. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, William. It's always interesting to hear your own biography kind of told back to you. It makes you go, why in the world did I do it that way? But nonetheless, I want to thank you all for providing me the opportunity to speak to you today. You know, as mentioned, I've had quite a broad experience within industry and government, both state government as well as federal government, and especially within the ChemBio defense and forensic communities. And, you know, looking at the list that was presented a little bit earlier, it's, you know, I've actually met and worked with many of you in the past, and so it's quite nice to get to engage with you all again. You know, I was thinking about this right before we started. It's a bit of by happy chance that I'm speaking with you all today, because today is in fact my 1-year anniversary of being in this position. And as it was stated by William, you know, one of the things that I came into this position wanting to do was a number of things, and we'll talk through some of them more in depth a little bit later. But really, the focus was initially on bringing awareness of the emerging threat space to the department, and part of that was just bringing the awareness of the chemical and biological defense stronger across the department, up to senior officials within the Pentagon and the combatant commands, and then also working with our interagency partners. And we've worked really hard in the past year in order to do that. Another one is just kind of redesigning how we're even structured and how we see ourselves within the program. And the reason I'm mentioning that is the next thing I'm going to ask the team to flip to is the new video. So some of you may have already seen this out on LinkedIn or on other social media platforms, but this was a big push for us to start recognizing that we need to gain awareness into the Chem Bio Defense program across the industrial complex, across the academic performers, as well as within our USG organizations. So with that, let's go ahead and show the video, if it starts.
Our warfighters face unthinkable threats. The pace of scientific advances and technological innovations continues to accelerate. And as a result, the hazards we must counter are new, non-traditional, asymmetric, and extremely complex. As we enter a new era of great power competition and face increasingly complex threats, we must shift our priorities and change how we operate. This transformation is necessary to prepare for surprise from emerging threats, reduce the risks they pose, and ensure the joint force can operate and succeed in chem-bio contested environments. The Chemical and Biological Defense Program solely holds the responsibility to develop and deliver cutting-edge capabilities for the warfighter to combat current and emerging threats, and plays a key role in executing the National Defense Strategy's objective to enhance the lethality of the joint force. Working side by side with the joint force, the four organizations that make up the Chem Bio Defense Program specialize in developing and coordinating requirements based on warfighter needs, executing science and technology and basic research, implementing advanced capability development and sustainment, and ensuring test and evaluation of Chem Bio Defense capabilities. The Chem Bio Defense enterprise results from all organizations operating together as a single unit to quickly deliver revolutionary capabilities to the warfighter. The Joint Requirements Office, the Joint Science and Technology Office, the Joint Program Executive Office CBRND, and the CBRND Test and Evaluation Executive all play a critical role, and each one is essential to the success of the warfighter. Cohesion, coordination, and integration both within the Chem Bio Defense Program and among our strategic partners are absolutely required for our collective future success. The strength of our relationships, the bonds and bridges across the enterprise, the department, and our interagency partners are the foundation on which we'll build the warfighter's ability to fight through and win in a world of complex chem-bio threats. We must anticipate future threats to deliver capabilities that enable the joint force to fight and win in chem-bio contested environments. Together, we will remain behind the warfighter and ahead of the threat.
Okay. So that's our new video. That is essentially our PR campaign that is going out across social media and across the department at this point. If we go to the next slide. One of the things that I want to do, I know not every one of you so far has worked with our office. So I just want to take a quick moment to review the Chem Bio Defense Program and essentially how we do business. This organization was set up as it stands today for about 18 years now. And what I'll just quickly run through is we've got an oversight function and a portfolio management function that is held within my office and shared with the U.S. Army. But how do we actually develop and coordinate the work that we're doing? So we've got our Joint Requirements Office. where the needs of the services are actually generated and fed up through them for requirements, right? So we see this as essentially that ideation phase, that light bulb phase. We oftentimes will plant the seeds of the new technology within the science and technology base. Working with government and industry and academic partners and so on and so forth, our components at the Joint Science and Technology Office are really there to search for novel transformation of our abilities to support the warfighter. They partner with like agencies and also international partners to try to align those programs and invest really smartly to really push the innovation boundaries. Unfortunately, not all programs germinate, like not all seeds will germinate. However, those that do will then move into the acquisition element of our program. So many of you have heard, and I saw that you have Dave Restione talking from the Joint Program Executive Office under U.S. Army. For us, those programs that are able to transition to that advanced development become seedlings of efforts with the support and collaboration of our industrial and government partners. So, and as those programs grow and grow, they ultimately move over and get tested for operational test environments through the partnerships with DUSA and the CBRNE test division. Again, they're still maintaining under the JPO ChemBio Defense, and as they harden, they'll ultimately move into procurement, where the services actually pick them up and will end up sustaining them long term, though we help them in the front with the sustainment. So this is a structure. When I first came on board, we actually just drew this out as a block diagram. And I will say that, when I sat in the seat and I had the first block diagram shown to me, I said, this is way complex. So let's figure out another way to talk about it. So we came up with this model. But one of the things that is critical about the performance of this program and our effectiveness in supporting the warfighter ultimately comes down to the close and consistent, constant coordination that we have within the services. And that's why you see a lot of the service symbols there at the bottom. They are not only there to be the customers for our work, but ultimately I see them as our board of directors for everything that we do. Over my tenure of the last year, I've really taken an eye towards developing more and more industrial models in the way that we manage and execute this portfolio. So having that board of directors mindset has really helped us shape how we support the warfighter across that research, development, and acquisition paradigm. So at the same time, the 4 organizations that make up the ChemBio Defense program are continuously improving their alignment of their effort from one end of the enterprise to the other. So we have a number of critical meetings where the Joint Requirements Office, JSTO, and JPO are all playing a critical role in discussing and engaging the holistic view of the portfolio so that we're not missing an advanced development program in light of an S&T base or vice versa. So, but what's really interesting about this tree chart, as I call it, is there are many opportunities for industry, as you can see across the line, to interject when there's good ideas and good programs coming out of industry to actually to come in and step in and get viewed as a potential game changer for what we're trying to do across the board. If we go to the next slide, please. What is the actual end goal, though? So the end goal for me, and I've said this, and it makes some people cringe and some people clap, but for me, I want to take threats off the table. My job is successful when we no longer really need my job. Our end goal is to really developing disruptive technologies that not only counter specific threats that we're facing, but ultimately disrupt our adversaries and protecting our warfighters both internally and externally. And in order to do this, we look at our portfolio from three different main portfolio views, and then one that is an enabler. So the first one being the understand portfolio, where we're really focusing on novel threat agent science. To me, this is critical when we're talking about emerging threats. If you don't know and you don't understand what you're trying to fight against, then it's really hard to develop a relevant and a effective capability against it. So trying to understand that threat characterization is essentially the underpinning within that portfolio. And then trying to develop revolutionary detection and decision support technologies all fit within that understand portfolio. Now, the next one is the protect portfolio. So we no longer look at medical and non-medical. We see protect as being both vaccines and prophylaxis, as well as collective protection and individual protection. Really, the focus there is to try to look at things as a defense in depth modality, or some people call it integrated layered defense, rather than trying to split out arbitrarily something that is a medical countermeasure or a medical product from a non-medical product. And then finally, we have our mitigate portfolio, which is focusing on all types of post-event technologies and processes, or anything from decontamination to medical therapeutics. Now, again, let me stress that while these actually seem like these are areas that stand alone, we view these as functions in a completely synchronized piece of a larger whole. They build on each other for a force multiplier effect across the board. So as we discuss through program assessments and as we discuss through requirements, we overlay every one of these portfolios to determine where is the best bang for the buck and where is the most effective countermeasures able to be played. Where is the best underpinning enabling science also across that acquisition process to help support those main capability areas. Okay, if we go to the next slide. Now, we are part of the DoD, and we will always end up aligning to the national strategies and departmental priorities. But the way that we do that won't necessarily be binary. You know, we're not a weapons system, and so what I mean ultimately is when the national defense strategy that we see here calls for rebuilding military readiness as we build a more lethal force, to us in the Chem Bio Defense program, that means something different than it does for the rest of the DoD. For us, it's not about rebuilding the military might, but ultimately relooking at how we can build capabilities that will enable our warfighters to continue their mission within that CB environment. Terms like rebuilding readiness and ensuring lethality, to us, again, means that the joint force continues to fight and can remain a lethal force. We have no downtime. We allow the Air Force to continue with the sortie generation that they would do in a normal environment. You know, our soldiers would need uniforms that have, you know, technology that allow them to fight within an environment in which they are being assaulted by chemical or biological agents. Our sailors having coatings on the ships that can be sheared off when exposed, or providing larger combat platforms that have embedded collective protection. All of those types of things are the types of things that we see that we can do to support that ultimate national defense strategy. If we go to the next, so part of that kind of revisioning of how do we look at emerging threats and how do we look at how more effective we can be within the national defense strategy made me want to go back to the basics. We went back and assessed from the very beginning, what is our goal? What is our mission in life? And what should we be focusing on? And how do we do our job better? We recognize that the pace of technology and the threat is moving faster and faster, and all of the players on the world stage continue to shift, and the conflict landscape changes. The hazards we face will continue to change. And as we've seen, especially in media recently, those hazards are becoming more and more non-traditional and asymmetric and frankly complex than what we have seen from the beginning of when the Chem Biodefense program stood up. So because of the past decade with the Chem Bio threats having evolved kind of exponentially and new strategic competitors emerging, we've also seen this erosion of societal norms that used to deter the use of chemical and biological weapons. Well, we have the Skripals and Navalny recently that have made us really decide to start shifting and adapting. So we've built a brand new strategy and a brand new focus to our mission and vision in order to help us reposture for this future environment that we're actually facing down right now. So the new mission and vision is really focusing on trying to get the CBDP able to anticipate future threats in order to deliver the capabilities that the joint force needs to fight. But fighting is not good enough. For us, it's fight and win in a CB contested environment. And then to successfully deter or defeat CB threats from near-peer competitors. In order to do that, we must adapt as the threats and the adversaries evolve, right? So maintaining this agile posture ultimately requires a cross-enterprise coordination to accomplish the strategy. And the strategy, as I've built it, has 4 main goals. The first one is planning for the future fight. The second one is delivering at speed, and then focusing on a drive of innovation and optimization of how we just do business, full stop. So let me go to the next slide. In the next slide, I want to focus just very briefly on our first goal, and that is planning for the future. So what we really mean by this is being able to identify the threats early. We utilize our relationships not only with our international partners, our interagency partners, IC partners, and try to get a better picture of what the future threat space is going to look like. Use our S&T base and our threat characterization to figure out how those could ultimately impact not just the warfighter, but the actual operational plans of the services in order to really guide our capability development. The next one is to use the knowledge of those threats and those capability gaps to better inform the requirements and trying to minimize the potential development gaps that we might identify, and then process that back into an establishment and institutionalization of a process to help inform not only the services plans and requirements, but also those of the combatant commands. The next slide is really focusing in on the delivery at speed. And, you know, you guys are coming from industry, so I don't have to tell you that speed and agility and flexibility in your development processes are absolutely critical in order for you to stay at the pace, or if not ahead of the pace, of the risks that you see. We need to have in this program, or we're developing in this program, a greater tolerance for risk. Because identifying and managing and accepting risk early provides us the opportunity to also shift the view of failures as opportunities for the enterprise. This also means engaging with new partners who can bring in novel, innovative solutions and iterative approaches from development to the fielding to be much more efficient in our production process. And then ultimately trying to decrease that time from concept to capability is really where I think that we're going to get the best bang for our buck. Being able to turn over, you know, a greater focus on modernization and that flexibility will ultimately help us adapt to threats as they change. And I think that we're seeing that right now in COVID. I think it's a great example of the adaptation of capabilities and the speed by which you can get things done. the next slide is about driving innovation. And I mentioned this already a little bit before, but to me, the drive for innovation comes from ultimately my time in industry. You know, when we were standing up Nephron Pharmaceuticals, there was a discussion of, you know, do we drive to build processes by which the FDA had not yet seen and work through the argument of trying to get them to agree to us from a capability having a new process, or should we do things the way that we traditionally have done? And ultimately, we decided to push the envelope with the FDA, which we were successful at, and building a new methodology of manufacturing that ultimately got approved. But to me, in the chem-bio defense space, as we have the pace of our threat expanding and accelerating all at the same time, we also need to accelerate our ideas, make technology breakthroughs, and ultimately chase down those disruptive technologies that will make an impact. But part of that is also looking at chem-bio defense is no longer a unique and separate function to the larger service need, right? And I already kind of mentioned it earlier, but how we have major combat platforms, we could be inserting chem-bio into those combat platforms if we build it right and if we engage within the right service combat developer community in order to really accelerate and disrupt the technologies. We also have to expand our partnerships across the industry and across government and with our CWMD stakeholders to increase the opportunities of innovation. Some of you that have worked with me in the past also know that I used to work very closely with rapid prototyping cells within both SOCOM and within the Intel community. And those techniques and those processes by which risk mitigation was achieved to drive the innovation is really something that we're trying to bring into the program as well. And then also leveraging industry best practices to focus on industry partnerships to help align us within the private sector R&D development community into the national security priorities is really where we want to ultimately go. And then the fourth and final goal is, if you go to the next slide, is optimizing our enterprise. And ultimately, this is me having to look in the mirror every day and wondering and trying to assess, are we doing things the right way? Are we driving our data decision or our decision making towards data to ensure alignment to our mission goals? Are we driving the budget discipline and the affordability into our processes? And how can we improve those business processes so it's much more effective to work with us from the community, and we have the stewardship to the American taxpayer that what we are doing with those funds is seen as competitive, business-like, and optimized for the end goal. So that is our new strategy. We just had it published in the last couple of weeks. And we have a few next steps, right? So at this point in time, my team is working on an implementation plan to execute this strategy through the enterprise, and then ultimately building out a business plan to try to strengthen our governance procedures and reinforce our accountability practices and outline our decision making. So it's much more transparent to those that either work within us or work with us on how we develop our strategies, our programs, and make the decisions within the portfolio. We also have a modernization strategy that is being developed to try to help us drive the vision of the future of what that joint fighting environment is going to look like in 2040 and 2060 and beyond that, so that we can really focus on trying to optimize our pathway. So the strategy itself describes how the enterprise will harness the rapid advances, right? But really, why are we there? It's because of the challenges that we see in both the chem and bio space and the challenges of emerging chemistry. So I'll spend a moment on this. The things that we're seeing there is the convergence of multiple scientific disciplines with the decreasing cost of synthesis and materials and automation. You know, there's continuous flow reactors that fundamentally will change the paradigm of how we need to look at production of chemical agents. Including that, we also have combinatorial chemistry, and the blend of the engineering sciences in with chem and bio has really transformed the way that we should be looking at both our technology, our opportunity space, but also ultimately our threat space. And with all of these emerging, converging disciplines, what we're seeing is, you know, DIY production scales. We're seeing significant advancements in delivery capabilities. Well, that's great if we're wanting to deliver a vaccine or if we're wanting to deliver a therapeutic, but as one could imagine, it also changes the paradigm on how we need to look at the threat space and what the delivery of a potential threat to our warfighter could pivot towards. We also see a lot of novel pharmaceutical mixtures, and so how do we deal with having such a complex and hybrid environment within our future threat space? So we're working very hard at observing that technology convergence and trying to counter it. If you go to the next slide, we also have the same issue in biotech, right? Many of you have been watching all of the advancements in CRISPR technologies, a lot of synthetic biology arguments and artificial intelligence and data science, again, converging with biology, which is great when we're talking about personalized medicine and gene therapies, but it ultimately can also lead us down a pathway of concerns of novel pathogens or, frankly, the reconstitution of eradicated threats. So there's the article that came out a few years ago where Canadian researchers rebuilt a pox virus. Now, the good news is, you know, it wasn't smallpox, but the bad news is it was pretty simple for them to re-engineer an eradicated horsepox virus. So we're thinking through that within the program as well. We're also looking at the alteration of presentation of symptomology when you're talking about biotech. But I think the one thing that I keep getting asked lately is how do we look at things like COVID? And with COVID having been, you know, very early on in the infections, the big question of, you know, was this man-made or was it naturally occurring infection? You know, for us in the program, it really takes us aback and it makes us think through what are future biothreat agents potentially going to be presented like. So we just finished a large biodefense assessment recently to look at exactly that. If we go to the next slide, you know, the emerging threat area is constantly at our doorstep, and it reflects the potential hazard of convergence of science and technology, right? But I think that what we recognize is that we cannot do this alone. And the cohesion and coordination and integration within the Chem Biodefense program, but also within the industrial base and with our strategic partners is ultimately what's going to help us drive our success. You know, we've got many folks within industry, the biotech industry, looking at things like in silico tools to help assess toxicology and human health hazards. We're seeing amazing investments in innovations in organs on a chip. So when we get things like these these types of candidates, you know, or any kind of future threat candidates, we could, through those organs on a chip, do efficacy studies and safety studies rather than clinical trials, and that is truly transformative for us. Because that can ultimately happen earlier in our drug development pipeline, so we can save on the back end millions of dollars of investment in drug candidates by saving ourselves some of those phase 1 clinical trials by doing things on a chip. Many of you who have worked with us know that we're investing in the advanced manufacturing facility in Alachua, Florida. You know, the purpose of this facility is ultimately designing platform-based medical countermeasures where we can use things like monoclonal antibodies to be able to accelerate delivery and adaptable countermeasures. It's really an interesting facility and is especially being used right now in COVID response through Operation Warp Speed. So I'm going to go to the next slide. I think I'm going to end there and start just opening up a general dialogue. But I will say that, you know, we see partners like you all as part of our greater ChemBio defense community, and we are oftentimes seeking your help through our RFPs and our BAAs and other processes to help us provide active feedback and really push towards the revolutionary ideas. So I want to thank you for your help for us in that. And then also thank you again for having me today. And with that, I will pause and wait for any questions.
Well, Dr. Vann, thank you. And absolutely, if you met the expectation and far exceeded it. And in fact, just to give you a couple of feedback from comments made in our Q&A, wow, a fabulous enterprise view. First time we've seen something at this level. So well done.